in terms of our involvement or my involvement in esports, it's something that I think most of us who are in sport and entertainment have sort of been aware of. I'm not sure that I truly understood it until probably 6 months ago. And then I had a chance meeting with the CEO and founder of Talon, who's based in Hong Kong, and then really went on what I call the MBA of esports, learning, reading, gaining insight and intelligence around just what it is, how it operates, I guess the dynamic of esports and how different it is, and how different it is also from different markets based on the style of game. So for me, you know, it's been a really, really exciting journey so far, really enjoyed it. And I'm really excited to talk more about it today, you know, about what Steph and I are doing now with Talent.
Okay. So before, sorry, just very quickly, so Nestle is here as well. So I'm going to hand it over to Nestle. And yes,
so
Nestle, what we've,
no,
not at all, not at all. So what
I've
we've done
been in
is,
front of the computer for the last hour, actually. I was at the wrong link. So look at me working in EdTech and not knowing my Zoom. Oh, sorry.
Okay. So let me, no, not at all. Let me hand it over to you officially, Nestle. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yes, my name is Nestle. I know it's hard to pronounce. You can just use the first one as a chocolate brand. Nestle, super easy when you think of it that way. I am the head of education for the Swedish EdTech and esports company Learn to Esports. I'm also a researcher. I'm a PhD and trying to, you know, work wherever I can with games, learning, and the intersection in between them. That's enough. You guys have much more interesting stories, so I think the mic should be with you. Should we go to Stephanie, I guess?
Sure. What do you want to know about?
Did we do the introductions? I'm late to this party, so you have to catch me up.
No, so Stephanie didn't get a chance to introduce herself, so go ahead.
Perfect. So I'm Stephanie Rice. I was an Olympic swimmer at the Beijing and London Olympics. Bruce is my agent, and so he represents me when it comes to brand endorsements and all my work in the media. And so when Bruce, who was just explaining before, had the opportunity to work with Talon, he knew that I loved games and gaming. In no way am I a professional, but I just really loved it as a passion. And so he brought the opportunity to me. And I think we're both on a very steep learning curve to learn all about esports.
That's wonderful to hear. So that was going to be my first question, actually. Where did this come from? Because traditional sports, especially professional athletes like yourself, doesn't immediately come to mind when you think of gamers. When you think of gamers, there's a certain image in mind. I'm not one of those images too, so I feel kindred spirited. So you are a gamer, obviously. This question goes to you too, Bruce. Like, what kind of games do you play? What do you prefer? How do you prefer to play them? And what has been your experience like being in the community of gamers?
So this understanding of esports is really new to me. I've probably only heard about it and learnt about it over the past 6 months. When it comes to gaming, I love gaming. I wouldn't say I'm a gamer because I don't play the traditional esports games, but I've always grown up loving board games and Mario Kart and all of those types of computer games. So this for me was an opportunity to bridge, I guess, my passion for gaming and sport and business all together. And so I think as much as I love games, I wouldn't classify myself as a gamer.
And I think Steph has probably got me covered when it comes to gaming. What I will say, and I hope she doesn't mind, is we do play Mario Kart together. But we've got a few games we actually compete because we're both competitors. We love competing. And I think that for me, whether it's esports or traditional sport, I think it's the competitive nature, the, you know, wanting to win, wanting to be successful, wanting to be involved with something that's successful and winning and competitive. I think that's the thing that keeps us all energized. And certainly when it comes to esports, you know, when you talk about bridging the gap, that in itself actually is very similar from traditional sports, and in esports is competition, winning. I mean, they're the things that we love most. And I think we, you know, I can't speak for Steph, but certainly for myself, that's what I enjoy.
Is it safe to say maybe there is not a big of a gap as we might think, as people might think, between traditional sports and electronic sports? we can say
Well,
maybe.
I think there's a really big gap, but I also think there are similarities, and I think we can for sure go into detail around those. But Bruce, what do you think?
I agree with you. I think given esports, the way I've seen it, certainly over the last 6 months, as we've sort of, delved deep in working with Talon, is that there are definitely some similarities. I think there's some things that traditional sport can learn from esport. And I think there's definitely things esport can learn from, or esports can learn from traditional sports in terms of bridging the gap. I think there's a really nice sort of midpoint where they should overlap and they can work really nicely together. And I think we're seeing some of those partnerships around the world now where you've got traditional mainstream sports now partnering with esports. And I think for us at Talon, one of those great examples is with Paris Saint-Germain, out of France. And the collaboration there is very much bringing esports, traditional sports together, sharing ideas and learnings and helping sort of support the areas where development is needed or where there might be, crossover or learnings.
Okay, this brings me to the killer question of this actual panel. Is esports an actually sports title? Can we consider it to be a sports title? I know it's not a difficult yes or no question. It's not an easy yes or no question. It's really complex, but yeah, I would like to hear your take on it.
Do you want to go first, Bruce?
Sure. Well, I think by definition, and I think Steph and I have had this debate ourselves, like we talk about this and we have talked about it consistently over the last 6 months that we've been involved with Talon about, is it or isn't it? I think if you look at the definition of sport, I'd say, yeah, it absolutely is. I think where you get the grey area and the argument is around whether physical exertion is the same in esports as it is in traditional sports. You can definitely argue that it isn't, but I think there's also an argument to say, well, you've got these gamers sitting in front of screens gaming for 10, 12 hours. A session takes quite a bit physically and mentally to be able to exert. And then again, the other definition of sport is around competition. So I think there's definitely, an argument for and against, and depending where you want to sit, you can find a pretty strong argument. And I think Steph and I, we've debated this on a regular basis.
I think that the key thing is that sport is also based on physical exertion, and esports doesn't require physical exertion. But at the same time, what is the same is that traditional sport requires like a balance between mental and physical high performance. And I think when it comes to esports, even more so with the mental side of things, the focus, the resilience, and competing under the pressure, all those things are the same that you would see in any type of competitive sport. I think for me, like the interesting one is chess, because chess is classified as a sport. It also doesn't really require physical exertion, but still the mental. I think for me, like coming from my very traditional background, chess and esports have similarities in that way, but I do think esports goes through far more pressure and quick, fast, rapid thinking and decision making that is seen in traditional sport. I mean, I think the really great thing that we're trying to do with Talon is educate them on the physical side to high performance and how that can benefit you mentally, because there is such a close relationship to feeling focused and being resilient, which you get out of having a strong body and a strong mind. And so we're really trying to work with them on increasing the physical side to their performance regime, because we know it will help with their mental side, and that will help in competitions as well.
Yeah, that is something we see lacking in esports because it's an emerging field. There is not much discussion about the physical health of the athletes, esports athletes, because it requires a lot of stamina, as Bruce mentioned. Although it's not physical in the sense that we take it traditionally, there is a lot of stamina, lots of energy, lots of calories burning, and also for example, the wrist problems they have, they are actual injuries, somewhat like sports injuries. So they have to consider and they have to take care of themselves like athletes, and I think, whether it be traditional or not.
I think if I just add into that, traditional sport is really aware of that injury prevention and recovery through nutrition and all of those things, which I don't feel has kind of yet come into esports. And I know it will only enhance the athletes around that recovery and their focus if they were really utilizing some of the things that traditional sport focuses quite heavily on. But I think that's also because esports is still quite new when it comes to like a big time sport and performing at this high level with these stakes. So that's really where Bruce and I are looking to, I guess, use our knowledge and skill to help them.
Yeah, we are really early on the stages, but we're coming there. I just saw one of the episodes of some of the doctors' shows, and I saw there was an esports player and he had an injury, and it was like heartbreaking. It was like all 30, 45 minutes of his agony and how his career was going to end. So it actually got into the pop culture, and there were references, and some of the teams are actually putting their money and hearts into it, hiring professional nutritionists and trainers in esports field. But yeah, it's still early on the stages, because there is I guess, concept or idea that these kids can just play and they'll be all right. They will play till they're exhausted, and then we can find another set of kids, because there is an ample amount of really good players out there. But that's not the case. We should do whatever we can to prolong their careers, because it's already a short one. Just like some of the really exhausting sports, it's very short. The retiring age, if we can call it retirement for them, it's very, very early. So the 2022 will be the first year the Asian Games will host esports titles. I have emailed you about it. I don't know if you follow up with that. It's been a huge announcement for many of us. It's going to be 6 titles on different games. And that brings the question, because we have an Olympic gold medalist with us. Do you think, are we ever going to see esports in Olympics?
I'm not sure. I think that it would definitely be a big discussion to be had as it grows. You always keep coming back to chess, because it's the only thing I think traditionally that there is like some kind of ability to form an educated answer to this question. Chess has obviously tried many times to get into the Olympics, and the Olympic Committee doesn't see it as an international Olympic sport. I do think when it comes to Asian Games, though, this is where esports is so much bigger than it is, say, in like Australia and places that are a little bit behind. So I love that they have this opportunity to compete at an Asian Games and get that experience of competing for your country, and how the teams will change in that dynamic. But in saying that, the Olympic Committee is very traditional and very old school. And I also think my stance on Olympic sports should be that you should only be allowed to compete at the Olympics if the Olympics is your biggest sporting platform. So I don't necessarily agree with some sports that already are in the Olympics, because they have a bigger competition. For example, tennis has all these other really large competitions. So the Olympics for those athletes is not a really big focus, and I think it should be. So I'm not sure. Bruce, do you have a different viewpoint when it comes to the Olympics and esports?
Well, obviously I'm not an Olympian, and Steph brings a really, I think, unique, interesting perspective to it. I think for me, if I look at it where you look at the most recent Olympics, if I had said to anyone 10 years ago, they're going to have skateboarding and BMX riding, which was our hobby that we did as a kid growing up out in the streets for fun, that it was going to be an Olympic sport, I'm pretty sure most people would have laughed and said, "You're kidding yourself. I don't know what you're thinking, but that's never going to happen." It happened. And I think just the movement that is esports around the world and how many people that it does touch, I think as it grows and evolves, I think the IOC are going to be forced to consider it seriously, because this is an audience of people that their sponsors want to talk to, that, are going to grow up, they're going to have kids, they're going to engage with it. I think it's something they're going to have to consider, whether it happens or not in the next 4 or the next 2 Olympic cycles, maybe not, but maybe within 10 to 15 years, you might see it. I think they're going to have to consider it at some point.
That's certainly true. Steph, you said something that actually that ties up with my next question. So esports has an incredibly growing audience, and they're really young, and they're really passionate about actually watching the action itself instead of whereas not doing it. and we see that traditional sports, many of the titles are losing their audiences. The audience number are declining, especially in very traditionally well-liked like soccer in Turkey and Brazil and England. You know, they're losing audiences because traditional TV is going a little outdated at this point. What do you think maybe some of those traditional titles can learn from esports? What are the factors that affect the esports audience to be so ample and large? And
yeah, I mean, this is a really big question. And I know that Bruce and I both speak a lot about this, because I think even during COVID, we realized like how everything went online and how we no longer needed to fly to places to meet with people, and everything, like even doing an event like this would have been so uncommon like a couple of years ago, but now we're very familiar with that. And I think esports is all about this online play, online fan base, online community. And it doesn't really matter where you're from and what team you play for. There's this real raging fan component to esports. And I think that that is something that we only see in the biggest sporting teams in the world, and only momentarily, like at an Olympics or at an NBA final or something like that. And so I think that traditional sport can learn so much about even just sponsorship and online fan base and online play that esports has in bucket loads. I mean, there is just so many fans, and those fans are really, really engaged on a full-time basis. And I think that also comes back to the consistency of competition and ability to connect. I think that esports can also learn from how like athletes have become celebrities now, and esports athletes are also becoming celebrities. And it's this new vehicle of having to understand how to manage sponsorship and your brand presence and all of these other factors that you probably didn't have to consider before. So I think there's a lot of really great crossover that we can both learn from one another.
I think it's, sorry, no, I think Steph has summarized it perfectly, and I don't think I can add much more. I think for me, the perfect marriage here is actually having esports, as I think I said at the beginning, and traditional sports working hand in hand. And I think it makes sense for an esports team to have a partnership like we do at Talon with PSG. And it makes sense for a PSG to have a relationship with Talon, because you're understanding how, you know, these consumers of product, which are now a significant fan base, how they operate, how they think, what they're interested in. And I look at PSG and the partnership we have, and it's a very clever strategic partnership because it's helping them build and understand that new fan base that esports has, as Steph said, in droves.
So Bruce, you're a really successful manager. Do you think the traditional sports management systems can be applied to esports as it is, or do we need some changes? Just like Stephanie mentioned, the sponsorship, the brand, the identity, the celebrity side of things, the whole management side of things, should it be applied or could it be applied to esports?
I think for me, like any sport, whether it's mainstream or whether it's esports, the most successful sporting franchises, teams and athletes are winners, and they're successful. So winning and being successful drives brand, sponsorship, television, digital deal, whatever those deals are. So I think going back to what we've been talking about and what our focus is with Talon is we want to make these athletes the best athletes they can possibly be. And that's all encompassing, you know, it's a holistic thing, physical, mental, helping them prepare and plan for what their life, you know, you talked about retirement, what that looks like for them so that they're comfortable while they're competing in their sport. So I think for me, that's the model that actually works, because success is what drives brand, sponsorship, all of those revenue streams. So going back to, you know, performance, and I think Steph, you know, has covered that off already, that's the most critical thing here. So from a traditional sports management model, winning and performance is equal number one. And then the rest of those things fall in very closely behind that.
And the legal side of things, as we all know, and all around the globe, there is no consistent legal regulations for esports that works in every country. So, and there is obviously a need for it. There is a need for a system to secure the well-being of the players, athletes, the teams, the investment, everything. How is the situation back there, and what do you think of it in general?
Yeah, I think, yeah, no, I
Management
mean, I think all of those things come with time, money, and resources, you know, in terms of those systems and support mechanisms around teams. And they come, it takes time, you know. I think the sport's grown so quickly, esports has grown so quickly, and I don't think it's had a chance to be able to implement those things as quickly as it's grown. So I think those are the things, again, that when Steph and I talk about our involvement with esports, is to help the overall organization try to bring some of those things forward, given our, you know, personal experiences, but still allow them to do the things that they do in terms of our, you know, management group and our athletes and our coaches to be able to still do what they do. We're coming in to try to help fast track them and bring all those systems and support around them, and understanding what that means to have an agent, what it means to, you know, have a professional administration around you, what it means to have, you know, things being set up so that you're managed outside of your sport and what you're doing and where you're earning your money. Those are all things that, you know, we're very much focused on in our roles, is to try to help support so that, you know, Talon becomes, you know, the place of choice for an athlete, you know, for an esports athlete, if we call it that, this is a place they want to be, because they're looked after from start to finish.
Do you have anything to add, Stephanie?
No, I would just say, like, to the point that Bruce made earlier, it does take a lot of time. I mean, I obviously was a swimmer, and it took until maybe only like 4 or 5 years ago for them to implement like a well-being program, and really focus on mental health and transition out of sport and things like that. And I would even say that that's still a work in progress. So, you know, and swimming has been a very traditional sport in the Olympics for years and years and years. So I think that we have a focus with Talon of having that awareness. That's obviously my life experience, and mental health is incredibly important to that. And as you said earlier, trying to keep the athletes like there and retention for as long as possible versus like high turnover of the athletes. So we're aware of those like mental health things that we want to implement within our own team. But as a broad community and esports as a whole, I think that really comes down to each individual team at this point in time doing that, and having awareness of those mental health issues, to like then maybe get an esports organization that heads it up and manages that.
Stephanie, did you start swimming in what age?
Well, in Australia, we have to do learn to swim as a child. So I did that from sort of 6 months old until maybe like 5 or 6. And I did junior squad. And then I just really kept progressing to the next level. So I really have been swimming in the pool since 6 months old. But I would say I became more of an athlete. It seriously started training as a job and as a potential career when I was probably 14, 15, and ended my career at 24. So about 10 years within a high performance unit.
We see that because sports being a huge part of the school system everywhere around the world. Do you think esports should be integrated in a school program, because it provides many opportunities for traditional sports, whereas a student may not? You started at 6 months old. This is very early, but generally kids come to get to know many of the sports titles in school, starting with clubs and, you know, and then progressing to varsity programs and then going to become professionals. And it actually affects their careers and their future choices, because they're provided with an environment to try out and see if they like it or would choose that as a profession. Do you think esports should be integrated within a school system?
I absolutely think it should. I mean, we've just seen recently with how much it's grown and the amount of financial opportunity that it can bring to the top players. And I think that it for sure should be incorporated into a school system, especially for kids at school that may not have had access to that kind of equipment and really give it a go as a career. I think it should be. I mean, even if you didn't take it seriously as a career profession, you're learning so much around like mental competitiveness and skill building and focus, that in a fun way, which I feel like kids always want to do, games and make learning fun. And I think esports does that.
I think the only thing that I will add to that is that I think the esports ecosystem is much broader than just gaming as well. It's game development. There's all the technology that supports gaming that I think is a genuine career opportunities, because we are living in a digital economy now. And so gaming is part of it. And that there's a whole ecosystem around that we want our kids and, you know, schools to be able to embrace, because whether we like it or not, that is the future. You know, digital, I mean, again, Steph talked about it. Look at what we're doing today. No one would have thought 5 years ago that we'd be having a conference, speaking at a conference, us in Australia, you know, you in Sweden, people in Pakistan, India, you know, wherever it is, we wouldn't have thought it. So schools need to evolve and change and develop. And I think it's really important because esports is far bigger than just playing games.
I also wouldn't assume that I will be working with schools writing curriculums around esports. That wouldn't be a possibility. I don't think so. But yeah, that is a good point, because I always give NBA references when I'm trying to explain this to people who are not into esports. The chances of you being a top athlete in the esports team and making money out of it is like almost similar, really similar for someone to be making in the NBA in the basketball. But it doesn't mean you should stop doing it, because kids in many countries are getting scholarships from playing basketball, just like it should be in esports, and in some countries it is right now. So I totally agree. And it also, yeah, the 1% is really pristine professional athletes, but there are, just like us, many other people who are working in the esports scene, because the ecosystem is very open and very enlarged, and it's growing really fast. So what I'm doing is I am working with esports and education. It's a really strange mix when you think about it, but there is a place for me, and there is a place for people watching. If you're interested in anywhere near esports, please reach out, because people are very open about talking about it. But yeah, one other thing is when we discuss, I'm sorry, I may be taking this to the education side of things, but it's what I'm passionate about. But the traditional sports are really, aside from the competitive side of things, it's really has positive effects on the growing pains of the children, because it's teamwork, it's getting you together, it gives you something to focus on, to put your energy in. Do you think esports can be used like that in youth groups and outreach programs in universities, not being competitive, but being a safe place for young people?
Yeah, I think for me, what I saw during, my son's a gamer, and what I saw during this COVID period here in Australia, and where I am in Melbourne, where we've been locked down for, you know, quite a significant number of months, was if it wasn't for gaming and his gaming community and being able to work, you know, game with his friends, he would have felt very socially isolated. Gaming allowed him to maintain connection with other people, and he's got friends in New Zealand, friends in Australia, obviously, and they maintain this really nice connection. And I saw gaming from a completely different perspective during that time, that this kept his mental health on track. And I think that of his friends as well. And I think a lot of parents would share similar sentiment around gaming. I think it teaches them, because not every, and I know Steph will share some thoughts on this too, not everyone's designed to be like a mainstream sports person, but there are options now in esports. If you love gaming, there's an option now where you can look at it, as we've said, as a career opportunity, whether it's as a player, whether it's as a management of a team, whether it's working with a game manufacturer, developer. There are so many things. And for me as a parent, you know, for me, it's very much encouraging it. Whereas I feel like maybe years ago, people would have looked and gone, don't get into gaming. There's no future there. There's no jobs there. There's lots of jobs. There's lots of opportunities. But for me, the social side of it was, during COVID, I think really understated and undervalued. It was really, really important. Steph, I don't know what your thoughts are.
I would just add to the fact that I think gamification has always been a really great way for everybody to learn. I know for me, I love apps and games that I'm using as like a mental focus or reaction skills training based thing, but it's fun and it's gamified. And I think that's what esports incorporates. So whether you are trying to be an esport athlete or have any role in any profession within esports, I think just the learning side of it is so important. Like one of my best friends did his PhD in gamification, and I had never heard of somebody ever doing that before. But it's because he builds apps and he tries to incorporate gamification into the learning. And I think esports really is the perfect vehicle for us to learn and us to learn to be more focused and resilient and mentally alert. And I think traditional sport teaches you that through movement, but I think gamification teaches you that online on your computer or in any environment like that. So I love it. That's, I think, why I love games so much, is the competitiveness and the wanting to win.
And maybe another beautiful aspect that we love games is the globalization of things. Because there was a study saying traditional sports generally tends to have fan bases that are geographically connected. So if you're from, let's say, New York, you tend to go for the team that's local to you, or, but esports doesn't have that. Either the teams, we don't follow teams by country. We are not fans or friends because of the country. There are no limits. There actually are no borders. It's tacky, I know, to hear no borders thing, but there are no borders on the internet. We don't even begin to cover the internet. It's a super vast space, and it's great. Right now we are talking. I'm from Istanbul originally, working for Sweden. You guys are from Australia. We are right now joined by Pakistani people. This is a conference organized by a Pakistani group. So this is incredibly well connected, and I'm really excited. I think we're at the end of our time, if I'm not mistaken. Correct me if I'm wrong somewhere. If we have any questions, that will be the time to grab the questions. But I just saw something on the chat. I don't know if you see, Bruce, that you look like the cricketer Brendan McCullum. Did you see that?
Oh, Bruce is going to love that.
Yes. Someone mentioned, Abdullah Sohail mentioned that you look like Brendan McCullum.
Tell him thank you. I'll assume that's a compliment. I'll take that as a compliment.
I think it's meant as a compliment as well.
Thank you.
So thank you very, very much. Okay, so questions, people over here. I think we have time for a couple of questions. If you want to ask anything, type it out in the chat. Just make sure that it says everyone over there, or else go ahead and just put out your question in the Q&A. Otherwise, you know what I always say, because some of you know me and some of you don't. Otherwise, you have to hold your silence forever.
I feel like we're getting married and someone is going to just get up and say you're brothers.
Okay, so I think, I think everybody's saying great discussion. So thank you very, very much. Bruce, Stephanie, Nestle, it was a pleasure having all three of you.
It was a pleasure meeting you and joining you too, Summer. Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
See you later.